Kombucha.
What kombucha?
Because
kombucha.
I ate a bunch of crappy pizza last night watching that crappy final
national championship game. Yeah,
I mean, it was boring.
it was.
I mean, yay, woo, Uconn.
Well, Uconn was really good, but well, let me tell you what. We had pizza up here last night.
That's what I had.
We're traveling on the road up here in Clarksville, and I'm in the man cave of my brother-in-law, Kurt. You'll see all the Marine Corps stuff in the background. He did 26 years and I think 7 combat tours.
Awesome.
It's a stress-free room. Let me tell you that.
That's cool.
It's total like Zen. I love it. But we were eating pizzas last night, Brendan, with that. It's called non-bread pizza. You get it at the Mediterranean store up here. Clarksville is home of the 101st Airborne. So you've got some really cool food places, but non-bread pizza. And I didn't feel stuffed at all. It was really good. It was kind of
because you didn't eat pizza. All right, we got the green rooms loading up. We got
a great show in store for you today. We've got Franz Beard going to be joining us right now. GatorBaitMedia.com. Chris Lee, Southeastern 14, and like Franz, just spot on with his commentary. A lot of great work he and his crew were doing. Also, Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, and Rodney Ore Insider. Kind of a transition day. We're going to be talking a lot of basketball early on, and we'll close out with a lot of college football. Let me tell you something. If you love college football, spring practice is underway. A lot of schools wrapping up their games. We're going to cover a lot today. We're going to first talk about Uconn's second national championship, and I'm with Dan Hurley. Uconn owns college basketball. They're driving college basketball. You cannot argue that unless you want to. Smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Allow authorizations on your phone. And let me say hello to some great listeners and viewers like Bill Wakefield, great Martin's Family Stores and Wakefield on Noble Street in Anniston, Alabama, and also the great folks in Carlisle, Arkansas, population 2,127 people. Jason Perry putting out great outdoor products. We're going to get more and more into that. You probably know him from starting a company called McAllister Hunting and also Mountain Khakis. He's going to be doing custom design work. We'll tell you more about that. Get ready. Here we come.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Brown here. We got a great one here today, and yeah, Chris, we got Franz Beard on here with us right now, so we're gonna have you and Franz talking some serious basketball. I'm just gonna kind of step aside and get out of the way, but Franz normally comes on Mondays. Got caught in traffic in the no Wi-Fi zone between, I guess, Gainesville and Tampa. But we'll start with you, Chris, and talk about that national championship game last night. Catch him on the Southeastern 14, folks. Listen, there's a lot of great national stuff, but if you are serious, you read a lot. You want to lift weights with your brain, you need to be watching the Southeastern 14. Yeah. Uconn gets the win, Chris. That's their second straight national championship. I don't know what it is about the Irish Catholic school system in basketball, but Dan Hurley, 26 state championships at St. Anthony's up in New Jersey. Bobby Hurley was on back-to-back titles at Duke. Dan Hurley has just won back-to-back at Uconn up in Storrs. Your takeaway from last night, and sadly, March Madness is about to be behind us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think I wasn't surprised at all that Uconn won. This team just flips a switch in March. I mean, it was great anyway. I think maybe the one takeaway I had after watching Connecticut was like, I don't know how that team ever lost to anybody during the season. I know that the Klingon injury was part of things, and sometimes you just have a bad night, but that team was amazing. I mean, Purdue, the number one 3-point shooting team in the country, I think by percentage or close to it, couldn't do anything. Zach Edey ended up with 37, 39. I don't remember. It might have been the most – it might be the least remembered near 40-point performance in Final Four history in hindsight.
Yeah.
Because UConn was just that dominant. I mean, and he got points, but they weren't easy. He looked – almost times looked like a fish out of water because of Donovan Klingon. I mean, that team is just amazing. You look at the parts. I mean, taking mid-major kids that one of their best players is a kid who averaged 3 points a game at a Patriot League school as a true freshman. Yeah. It's just amazing to see what Dan Hurley's done.
It is. And Chris, you look at Klingon, he came in, they've got two big guys that could go up against Zach Edey. Zach Edey has been around a long time. He's from Toronto. I don't think he can even get NIL money, but do you see him being a big force in the NBA, or is he kind of another Sean Bradley, the 8'7" guy from BYU that the Sixers drafted in the mid-'80s as the number one pick?
I'm probably the wrong guy to ask because I don't watch the NBA at all and haven't in a couple of decades. But I mean, it's still basketball. It's still a 10-foot hoop. They still have a 3-point line. I cannot imagine he doesn't have a use on somebody's roster somewhere, somehow, just because he makes it so difficult to get off shots. I mean, he can pretty much dunk without jumping. I mean, I think, if this had been a 30-year ago conversation, I'm guessing Zach Edey would have been a, top 5 pick. The game has changed a lot, but I still think a game in which this guy doesn't have a use is hard to fathom.
Oh, he's got a use, but he's just. But last night they were clearly just wearing the guy out. And Franz, you talk a lot about Purdue as Purdue. Matt Painter in his 19th year at Purdue. Purdue, oddly enough, has won more games in the NCAA basketball tournament than any other team in history without winning a national championship. I don't know if that's much of something to hang your hat on, but you always call them Purdue. Franz Beard of Gatorbait Media.
Their great history starts back with a guard that they had from Terre Haute, Indiana, named John Wooden, who ended up being, fairly famous in his day. Here's the thing that's so amazing about him. Their incoming recruiting class is ranked 13th. It's the first time they've had a top 29 recruiting class since 2012. You think about that, what Matt Painter is doing there. And, I wrote about it today. You look at what Dan Hurley's doing. You look at what Matt Painter's doing. Yeah. They're doing it by getting guys that fit their system. They're letting Duke and they're letting Calipari and some of these other guys get all the 5 stars they want, but they're winning their way with their kind of guys. And the game is about personnel and having personnel that fits what you do. In answer to what Chris was saying, Zach Edey will play in the NBA. And I think we're heading toward a cosmic change in the NBA where the big guy is going to become a viable player again. I think we found that having 7-footers raining threes, the game is boring and it's too inconsistent. The great thing about a dunk is this: it's a high percentage shot.
Yeah, it is. Franz, what you just said, Chris, kind of piggyback off what he said about, the game is changing. And in college basketball, I go back to Jay Wright when he first got to Villanova. And Franz, you're right. They were signing in the first 3 years 5 or 6 5-stars. And Villanova was about a 500 program. And then Jay Wright goes back and he says, okay, we're not recruiting to our model, a small private Catholic school with rigorous academic standards. And because of that, they made a change, and then they won a couple of national championships and had a lot of success. And now he's out of the game, and a great analyst on TNT last night. I hate that, but Chris, the game is definitely changing, and in the SEC, I think it's changing probably more than it is anywhere.
Yeah, there's two things there. I think there's the roster composition part, and man, I cannot get past next year quickly enough when we get all the 24 and 25-year-olds out of college sports.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, I've got a nephew who took advantage of that, was a walk-on at Wyoming, ended up making the CFL because of extended tenure. So, I mean, there's some good things that come out of it, but it's just, I mean, Cam Spencer's 24. Yeah, we talked about him early. You know, how many guys in college basketball are like that are on year 5 or 6? I can't even keep track anymore. I mean, I thought this was the year that we weeded those out, but I guess we got one more year of that. I'm looking forward to that being out of it, because I think what's happened now, your 18-year-old 5-star out of high school who had a lot of value then, again, you got kids, when you're playing 18-year-olds against 24-year-olds, it's like having a 29 or 30-year-old in AAA for baseball. If that guy can't handle that level, you got a problem. And so I think it's sort of doing some weird things with the rosters and the talent and development of younger stars and things like that. That's number one. Number two, and I'm a big analytics guy, but I think sometimes, and it's funny, things were right in front of us for years that nobody took advantage of. And you're seeing it in baseball, particularly with the shifts and the 3 true outcomes, the home runs, the strikeouts. It's taken some parts of the game out of it that we like. The mid-range jumper is kind of dead, as people have bemoaned. I think that you have in college basketball, the force of roster experience is driven by COVID, and the analytical side, it's just changed the game and made it a lot different. And back to Zach Edey, it's like, used to be a guy who could just clog the paint and hit twos with ease isn't good enough, because now you got to spread the floor and that guy's got to shoot threes. And I don't know, sometimes I wonder if the game is better for it. I don't want to go back to the 1980s when we don't have a shot clock and a 3-point line. I go back and watch that now, that's unwatchable. But I wish there was a little bit more of a balance between all the forces I've just thrown at you here.
And there's a lot. That's a lot, and it makes sense. Friends, you talk about when we were all, in high school and college coming up, everybody wanted that big guy, and then you had 2 big forwards. Now, 6'7", 6'8" guys that can run up and down the court and jam it. And really, they're all, because of the AAU, and we all know what AAU does, and kids in 7th and 8th grade, all of a sudden you're seeing a guy that's, as tall as Franz or Brendan when he's in 7th grade, and he's got a new gear bag every weekend when you see him playing, like, sure, he's in 7th grade. They're sold off in that's just what it is. And it was refreshing to see, like Chris said, a guy averaging 3 points from a Colonial League school. There's a lot of great stories. Look at the Gators. They bring in 5 guys this year from all over the country that did not start their careers at Florida. And Franz, you've been covering basketball a long time. The interest is there, and we talked about this, Brendan and I did before we got on the air. Look at the numbers that the women are drawing, and look what the men are drawing. I don't know what the numbers were from last night's game, but did it hold on, Franz, and beat the women's game?
No, I doubt it, but here's the one thing about it. Caitlin Clark is a shooting star. And one thing about shooting stars is if they fizzle, nobody remembers the shooting star. Caitlin Clark, if she does not go on to have a brilliant WNBA career, she's going to be that shooting star. I don't see anybody in the women's game capable at this moment of filling her shoes, of filling that void and creating that excitement that she did. Dawn Staley is going to win a number of games. And Dawn Staley is Uconn men in the female version, and that, speak softly and carry two great big people who can club you to death,
Yeah.
and Dawn's figured it out. The women's game is played below the rim, but she's got the big people who can do it. The men's game is going to go back to this. Again, as I said, a dunk. Everybody is living on these analytics, and I know Nate Oates is sitting there and he's saying, well, we can bomb away. Well, guess what? Uconn got out there and defended their bombers, and in the end, their bombers failed. Purdue was averaging 8.5 made threes a game. They only got 7 of them off the entire game because, I said on this show a week ago that Uconn would be the best team because they had the best player in the tournament, a guy named Tristan Newton. And guess what? He was the MVP. Look at what he did last night. Something like 19 points, 7 rebounds, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, something like that. The game is still dictated by guards, but there is a place for the big guys still in it. But again, it comes back to this. You have to coach to your system, and you have to find the players that fit what you want to do. John Calipari, I think, will reinvent himself at Arkansas. I think he's going to reinvent himself there because, John spent all these last 10 years, and I talked to him at Peach Jam a couple times, and he said, look at what we're doing. We're taking kids who are coming from nothing, and in a year, they're millionaires, and they're able to take care of their family for life. And he lived and died with that model. And here, here's the thing about this. I know I'm kind of drifting off from the national championship game, but here's this thing that why he left Kentucky. At Kentucky, you are just another coach until you've won 4 national championships. Just like John Shire is just going to be another coach at Duke until he's won 5. That's just the way it's going to be. Yeah. These guys, it's like Billy Donovan turned down Kentucky twice because he was content being the first Billy Donovan at Florida instead of the next Adolph Rupp at Kentucky.
Yeah.
And this is why they're going to have a hard time. Danny Hurley last night basically told Kentucky, don't call us, we'll call you.
Yeah. Let me throw something at you, though, Fran. And that along that line, Chris, when you make a statement, now, Nick Saban didn't say ever, we run college football. Dan Hurley did, and I think that was a shot over the bow, as Franz alluded to Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, and Kentucky. As Kevin Skarbinski was on with us yesterday, said, since 1999, UConn's now got 6, which is, wow.
Yeah.
It's got now 3 more than Duke, 3 more than North Carolina, 4 more than Kansas, and 5 more than Kentucky in that time frame. And the SEC hadn't done it since 2012.
Well,
Frank, and Chris, what do you think?
UConn's done it with 3 different coaches too.
Yeah.
No, look, tournaments are always a little bit fluky. Like you go back and do 2014 over again with Kevin Ollie, who was out of coaching a couple years later. That's probably not going to happen again. Everybody's made a lot of the Big Ten tournament drought and haven't won one since Michigan State in 2000 or whenever that was. Again, I think if you go back and replay it, somebody gets one somewhere. Purdue gets one. Michigan State maybe gets another one. So some of it I sort of cast off as a little bit flukish. That's what happens when you decide things by tournaments, just like when the Giants beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl that one year when they were 8-8 coming in. But let me offset against this other thing. I thought that this tournament this year, because you've heard me saying it all year, there's more parity in college sports than I remember. We saw it in the playoff selection, we had 2 teams that held the number 1 spot in Ohio State, or, that didn't. Georgia was the number 1 team until a week or 2 left and didn't get in. And you had 8 or 9 teams that could have maybe made cases for spots in one way or another for a 4-team playoff. And it was what it was. And you're seeing it a little bit in college baseball. And I think you saw it somewhat in college basketball this year. I thought that would play out in the tournament this year with the parity. I thought there'd be upsets. I thought there'd be all kinds of craziness. It was the largest margin of victory in the tournament. I think the second largest in a while. That was a little bit surprising. And then again, offsetting is everything I just said, Connecticut being able to dominate in a parity-laden world of college sports was just pretty amazing. And again, those are some things that I wasn't shocked that Connecticut dominated the tournament the way it did, but the lack of the blowouts and things other places did surprise me a bit.
Yeah, and we haven't had. I mean, look at the Super Bowls. It was a super bust for a while. Now the games are pretty damn competitive. Yeah. Chris, I know you've got you're working on some stuff, so I don't want to keep you too long but we want you on here every time chance we can get because you give great information out all the time.
A little bit longer, Dave.
Okay, yeah, because I knew you had said you had. Okay, that's what I was worried about. Just kind of give me the okay. All right, so friends, piggyback off of what Chris just said because it makes a lot of sense. And here's a good one from Shoney down in Valdosta. Why would Clark not make an NIL killing next year at Iowa? I think she might be out of eligibility, but again, with the virus protocol, like Chris said, the 25-year-olds, and I think she's 21 or 22. Can she stick around another couple of years and make more than she would in the WNBA? I mean, who's backing them?
I think the WNBA, I think they're going to gear everything to her, and they're kind of tying their star to her. Now, the question for me with Caitlin is going to be this. The defense that they play in the WNBA is much, much better than anything she saw at the collegiate level until maybe the Final Four. Yeah. Uconn really played her tough defensively. And by the way, that was a legitimate foul there at the end of the Uconn game. But the problem was when it was called, because they wouldn't. If you're not going to make that call in the first 5 minutes, then why would you make it in the last 5 seconds? And that was the problem with that foul. But Uconn played her well defensively. She's not. I don't know that even with that great step back 3 she's got and the ability to make threes from all angles, she's going to really have to make it, I think, as a passer in the WNBA. Yeah. And she's a brilliant passer, but will she capture the same imaginations that she has done as a collegiate player? Because as a collegiate player, you went out there thinking she could get 60 tonight. She's that good.
Yeah.
But they never played defense. But, she really didn't play a lot of good defensive teams. South Carolina just absolutely, after that first quarter, smothered her. And, Rob, you made a legitimate point about where the women's game is right now. But if her star doesn't continue to ascend, then the WNBA is going to be spinning its tires right where it is right now. And, I got to ask the other day, is she the greatest women's player of all time? I saw, I had teams that played against Cheryl Miller that I coached. I had teams that played against Janice Lawrence, that I coached. I saw Nancy Lieberman play in person, and Nancy Lieberman, I think is the only women's player I've ever seen who could have made an NBA roster. And now she would not have started, but she was good enough to make a roster. She was that good. She used to play in the summer league games and she'd score 10 or 12 points and could hold her own. I don't know. I have not seen another, it's wonderful to have a player of this magnitude, but who's going to be along pushing her as well? who is she carrying along with her? You know?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing about having superstars. Magic Johnson came into the league the same time Larry Bird came into the league. You know, you think about that. Kobe Johnson, I mean
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant. My mind's fried. Kobe Bryant comes into the league at the same time there is Michael Jordan, you know. Yeah. And at one point in time, if you think about it, you got Barkley, you got Bird, you got Clyde Drexel, you got,
Hakeem Olajuwon.
You've got all these great players pushing the game upward. It didn't rely on just one guy. Even Michael, in his greatest years, wasn't the only one carrying the torch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is my concern for the WNBA.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And Chris, the one thing for sure is that, the risk of loving something so much is that you risk losing it. And I heard that on a great podcast called 1,000 Casts, Oliver White. I recommend everybody watch that. It's about just under 30 minutes. But we love the game the way it is. We love our teams. We love our players. And we find those stars that we latch ourselves to, and we go with them up or down. And by the way, Shoney says Caitlin Clark's not out of eligibility. But Chris, tell your thoughts on kind of what Fran said. I think whether it's men's or women's basketball, we do love the stars. Zach Edey if you're an ad marketing guy, he's just not a real likable guy. But Caitlin Clark, on the other hand, people love her because she's kind of the all-American girl from West Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah, I was reading something, and sorry to take a little bit of a detour, but there's a point here from Joe Posnanski, the baseball writer that writes football. I subscribe to his whatever you call it, not blog spot, but newsletter that he sends out through email. I've drawn a blank, but you guys, if I said it, you know what I mean. And he talked about this phenomenon that's happened since when we were kids. And it used to be like it back in baseball. If the Red Sox and the Yankees were playing for fifth place on the last day of the season, it still mattered to fans. Now it's all become about, those games don't matter because you're not in the playoffs, or, you're winning games needlessly to, damage your draft position. We look at things very differently than we used to. And here's my point with Caitlin Clark. And I'm not pushing back on anything Fran said, but in terms of about her legacy and WNBA and all the things that'll need to be done at the next level. And again, I don't really follow it, so I'm not the guy to speak to it. But I guess the thought I had is at some point a long time ago, we stopped letting accomplishments for the sake of themselves be accomplishments. And it's become this winter. Like, I'll give you an example. Chris Jackson just lit it up at LSU. Nobody remembers Chris Jackson now. Well, first of all, he changed his name, and that didn't help. Is the basketball player he wound up being because he was just okay at the NBA level. But if you remember him at LSU, and just he lit everybody up. We'd never seen a player like him. He couldn't be stopped. And I feel like in all this discussion of Caitlin Clark and the way that society's moved and how we recognize things in the moment, we've gone to this thing where you've either got to succeed at the highest level, the pro level, or else all your other accomplishments don't maybe carry the long-term meaning that they did. Look, sports are hard to play. I think if you ever want to get a really good appreciation for sports, watch them across a bunch of levels. We watch NCAA basketball at highest levels. We watch the NBA. Well, go watch 10-year-olds play basketball. Go watch high schoolers play basketball and all levels in between. And then you start to realize, my high school was a decent football high school. We've had one guy that's ever made the NFL, and he made it for a cup of coffee. We were a 3A high school in out of 3A. Now it's, I think, a 6A in Tennessee. But here's the point. A lot of good football players came through my high school. Some of them made college. Some of them that were really good in high school didn't play in college or didn't play much. And one of them went on to the NFL where he was just a dude. He dominated high school. And that's hard to do because a lot of other kids that grew up playing with him couldn't hold his jock once he got to that point. That is a long, rambling answer, but I guess that's my way of saying that for Caitlin Clark or Donovan Klingland or whoever we're talking about, let's not forget the specialness of what they did in their time without going to the next level, because it's really, really, really hard to do. And another way I think I've appreciated is watching SEC baseball. All the great players that I've seen that have gone through the league that either didn't make the majors or struggled to make the majors. We struggle with the idea of letting somebody's accomplishment in the moment for what it did have a lasting memory, and I hope we don't lose that with Caitlin Clark, whatever happens.
Yeah, and the risk is with anybody, and both of y'all are making such great points. You run the risk of forgetting about their career.
Yeah,
I mean, Charles Barkley is one I use as an example. Did not ever win a championship, but played championship level basketball his whole career. It made everybody around him play better, work harder, and dig deeper in themselves. Friends, the psychology of sports. I referred to Dr. Kevin Elko, who's he spoke to us at Regions Morgan Keegan a few times. He's Alabama's guy that Nick Saban would go to. You talk about getting inside the mind of people. And I know Steve Spurrier, I've read it where he uses sports psychologists and taps into their brains. Urban Meyer probably does the same thing. You look at anybody successful. I think most people, Chris, you're right. You think about all the people that all of us, this group here, have known throughout our lives. How many close friends do you have that have made it at the next level of basketball, football? I mean, it is so rare. Mm-hmm. It is so rare. That's why I love Ben Troop comes on here a lot. Ben, in his neighborhood, guys, he was an All-American at Florida. There were 3 or 4 other kids in his 2-block neighborhood that all played big-time SEC football and went on to the NFL. I mean, that's unheard of. The only thing close to it, look it up, the Canali family in Memphis. There were 4 kids in just one Canali family that went to the NFL. There were 3 brothers that came to Memphis in 1858, Dominic, Michael, and Andrew, all named after, of course, great Catholic saints. But that's just unheard of. But most people we know that played college sports didn't go to the next level. And some of the best ones we've ever met are the ones that labored in obscurity, friends. You know that. That's what great writers, that's what y'all do. And Buddy Martin does. You find these people that were kind of off the grid, but it's been an unbelievable conversation. Chris, I know you got to get going, but I mean, stay with us if you can, because I'm just always trying to be mindful of time. I had an executive producer say, just be careful about keeping people too long, but we're going to bring in Yancey Porter from Rebel Yell Hotline. Love this discussion when we get on here. And Yancey, we've got Chris Lee, Southeastern 14 on here. Franz Beard, GatorbaitMedia.com, and of course, Brendan Martin, our EP in Ocala, and having a great discussion about basketball, the future. You know, Caitlin Clark, what she's done for the women's game, the men's game. I hadn't seen the ratings yet, but Yancey, you got kids playing sports nowadays. The women are going to be close, if not surpassing, the men's game this year because. Maybe because the women's game was a little bit more, exciting. It was a closer game. But what's your takeaway from all this?
Well, like you said, I think the women's game has gained a lot these last few years, and especially this year with having a dynamic player like Caitlin Clark. A lot of storylines. South Carolina, can they regain their form that they missed last year, which they did, obviously, and LSU. Their head coach down there is always going to be a lightning rod for any kind of success or attention. So, I think it was just kind of like the perfect storm, so to speak, for the women's game this season.
Yeah, and Chris and Franz, you heard what Yancey's saying. It's changing. It's really cool that the women's game is doing what it's doing. With that, it doesn't need to be propped up, and talk about what that means, friends. And I want to get back and this is a great roundtable discussion. And I'm with Brendan. The day after a national championship, you get Yancey Porter, Chris Lee, Franz Beard on here with us. We're covering a lot of ground, but pick it up, friends.
Well, my hope is that there will be somebody to carry the torch for Caitlin, because Caitlin has been, in one respect, a very polarizing figure. So much attention was drawn to her that we almost lost sight of the greatness of the South Carolina basketball team. Dawn Staley put together, and when you think about it, she lost 5 of her 7 top players are now in the WNBA, and she came back and she had a bunch of kids out there. Of course, she had the girl in the middle who, if there's a bar fight, you want her on your side.
Yeah.
Cardoso, my goodness, talk about just big and strong. I mean, scary strong.
Yeah.
But Dawn's got a good system going there. But Caitlin almost took away from the absolute greatness of what Dawn Staley did. We tend to forget what an absolutely brilliant coaching job Gino Auriemma did this year, losing 5 players to season-ending injuries. And he still gets to the Final Four. And I still wish that Paige Brookers had the last shot. I'm too much of a purist here. I realize it was a foul. Yes, it was. It wasn't called, though, in the first 5 minutes. So why call it in the last 5 seconds? And it deprived us of maybe one of the really fabulous endings to a great game that we could have had. And that is Paige Brookers makes the shot. Everybody says, holy cow, look what happened. Maybe she's as good as Caitlin. Or, she misses it and everybody says, well, Caitlin pulled through. But we were deprived of that moment by a zebra making a bad call.
Yeah.
But we've got to, somehow, some way, for the women's game to continue to make this growth, somebody's got to carry the bags. I think that we've got 3 truly great coaches in the women's game, in Kim Mulkey and Dawn Staley and Gino.
Yeah.
No question, those 3 are, and all you got to do is look. I mean, between the 3 of them, there's 18 national championships since 1995. That's amazing.
Yeah. Friends, to have that spread out over 3 coaches. Chris, I want to throw this to Yancey and then Chris kind of pick up on it. We saw Wes Moore was on yesterday from Little Rock, ESPN 103.7 The Buzz. He broke that story Sunday afternoon and Sunday night about John Calipari from Kentucky to Arkansas. And it was asked by Kevin Skarbinski yesterday, how serious were the discussions with Chris Beard? And he said, very close. And he knew, and he knows Chris Beard very well from his years in Little Rock. Of course, Wes is sports director, Fox Sports Channel 16 in Little Rock. But Ole Miss people are glad Chris Beard stayed. Let's talk about what's going on with Ole Miss basketball in light of almost losing their coach, but keeping him. That says a lot about his loyalty to Ole Miss.
Yeah, man. Everybody's gearing up for this weekend. They're expecting to bring 6, 7 portal players in for official visits this weekend. They plan on signing around 8 portal players, like everybody in the country.
Wow.
Everything is gone to the portal. I guess he's following the Lane Kiffin train here, the model of portal players. But it's going to be a big roster turnover. I think it got hairy for about a day there, but talking to people very, very close to Chris, I don't think it got as close as some of the Arkansas media and fans led it to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, you're looking at what they're doing down at Ole Miss with Chris Beard. This guy's not been coaching that long. I think he's one of the best young coaches in college basketball.
Yeah. I don't know how you define young anymore, but he's certainly got a lot more.
In terms of the number of years he's been coaching.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure. Go back and look at his bio and the places he's coached. I mean, he coached for teams that I didn't know existed. It's a bizarre path to hear that. And if you want just to really take a deep dive of something, go back and look at Arkansas Little Rock's Ken Palm page for all the years that it's had basketball. I think they go back to 2000, 2002, something like that. And and like they're the 300s, the high 200s, and all of a sudden they got this 1 year where they're in the top 50, coached by a guy named Chris Beard, and that's really the year that got his star to rise. But I think when I'm just thinking about the whole Chris Beard and Ole Miss thing, Chris Beard, I think, would be a top 10 coach in college basketball on just about anybody's list. Top 15 if you want to be really conservative, but probably top 10. And isn't it amazing we're sitting here at a time where Auburn basketball is super popular. They sell out the gym. I mean, Auburn, we used to hear like nobody's ever going to care about basketball in the state of Alabama. Well, you have what's going on there. You have Alabama making a Final Four and holding on to, at least for now, to an elite coach. And then you have Ole Miss, where you've got a top 10 coach in the game. That's, and I know the circumstances and everything. If it weren't for that, Chris Beard wouldn't be at Ole Miss. I get it, but just how crazy is it? We're talking about Ole Miss keeping a top 10 coach and people really being locked into basketball, because I guess it's kind of like soccer in America. Everybody said for decades, it's never going to work. Nobody's going to care. Look at it now, where you've got, us watching what happens in Europe. And I just think the explosion of basketball in the SEC landscape at places like Ole Miss, to me, is just an amazing story.
Yeah. And Yancey, along those lines, the Pavilion, Joyce and John Black Pavilion, huge donors to Ole Miss, and 9,000 plus. They sold out a bunch of the games this year. You mentioned 8 guys in the portal. That's the model. Who are some of the names you're hearing, and what are their stories?
Names I'm hearing for what now?
For Ole Miss in the portal for basketball.
Well,
if they're following the Lane Kiffin model, that's kind of scary.
I mean, that's a great question. I could give you some lists here. 1 second here, but first of all, let's go over what really is the needs, and that's they got to find some big guys that can put the ball in the hole. Last year they had a couple fly swatters, but really were not any kind of offensive threat at all. So they've got to find some guys that can do a little bit of both. That's first of all. Some names that are coming in. There's a guy at Utah State that is probably he's their number one guy. His name is Great Osabaro.
Asboro.
Yeah, Asbaro. Excuse me. He's a guy that is probably going to end up at Washington because his head coach at Utah State took the Washington job. But he can really stretch you. He's 6'8", he's rangy. A guy that is in that infamous power forward position that really stretches the field. So they're trying to get some of those guys. Aaron Bradshaw that just went in the portal for Kentucky yesterday. Ole Miss is in talks with, but we're going to see how much Cal wants to bring him to Arkansas or not. There's a wing guard, B.J. Freeman, that's coming in this weekend from Wisconsin. Milwaukee averaged 21 points last year, 6 rebounds. Tony Perkins, Ole Miss is trying to get in it. He's a swing guard. He averaged about 14 points and 5 assists last year. Micah Peavy out of TCU is in talks about coming to Ole Miss this weekend. He averaged 13 points, 5 rebounds last year. So there's going to be a host of them, Rob. It's going to be a lot of portals. There's going to be a lot of changeover. And you look at Beard's career. This is not unusual for him.
Yeah.
Everywhere he's went, he loads up on those portals year 1, year 2. And then he starts settling in like he did at Texas when he got those 3 5-stars there before he was dismissed. But he's been relying on the portal before the portal even became a big deal. So this is kind of the models he's used everywhere he's been.
Yeah, got a good question.
Of the Texas beards, I might want to add.
The Texas
Ancestry.com says I'm related to him.
There we go. France.
Sixth cousin.
There we go. Hey, when Elvis died, he had 8th cousins thrice removed going out there to the estate trying to, get a little something. But it was, hey, here's a good question from one of our viewers out in Claiborne County, Texas, 20-year Marine, Casey Goodjohn. I like this. Howdy. He is an Aggie, by the way, big time. Will NCAA or colleges ever go away from NIL? Do y'all ever see colleges or NCAA making an athlete sit for a year after they transfer? In my opinion, would create more continuity and stronger locker room. Got to remember, Casey spent many years as a Marine recruiter, so he knows about building a team and camaraderie. But whoever wants to take a jab at this one, I know that they did. Chris, do you know, Chris Lee, if that judge in West Virginia who issued a temporary deal where you could just go wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, has that been rescinded, rolled back? Where are we on that?
I don't know. To be honest, I've been so busy with following the, basketball and baseball. Yeah. I haven't locked into. Look, here's what I think the bigger answer is. Okay. People talk about college sports are going to be ruined with this or that. You heard baseball owners make the same argument in the 60s and 70s with free agency and collective bargaining and all those things. And now those franchises are worth, dozens of times over what anybody paid for them decades ago. Players are making more than they've ever made. There's no end in sight to the stream of money. College sports are going to end up in the same way. Anything that's worth saving, that's worth a lot of money, and college sports clearly worth a lot of money, they're not just going to fall apart because of stupidity, because there's too much money involved for the product to go away and people are too interested in it. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I would bet you if we do this show 10 years from now, it's going to look a lot more like the pros, where you've got salary control of some sort, where you got a certain amount that everybody can spend. You can't have year-to-year free agency. I mean, it's just too much chaos. The system we have, because on one hand, I'm in favor of guys making what they're worth, but this way where we do it, where you got collectives that have no direct affiliation with the school saying, we want Johnny quarterback over here, and the coach is looking at another guy, and it's highest bidder wins, and even if you're the highest bidder, does a kid end up getting the money? I mean, all these things that we know about intuitively. It's a mess right now. Should we be further along? Yes. Is there too much money and too much interest in the game for it not to move to a direction of order? Yeah, I don't know when, but whatever we're talking about today, 10 years from now, I would bet you most of these issues have been resolved, because you can't go on with the product with all these loose ends out there, untied.
Yeah, I'm going to play judge and jury on this round table. Rodney Ore, Tighter Insider. It's only $48 a year, folks. You need to be a subscriber. About 30 years, Rodney's been doing it since he came back from Corpus Christi, which Spanish in English means body of Christ. And Rodney's one of my favorites. He's written a new book called Bigger Than Bama. It's a great read about resilience, about life, about faith, and Rodney's story. Rodney, opening statement here on this version of the Round Table. Sidelines on a Tuesday morning, April the 9th. Yeah, my dad just texted me, boy, put the date, and the time is 8:48 and 32 seconds. But Rodney, what's going on in Tuscaloosa right now? We got spring practice. Alabama made it to the Final Four, and as Kevin Skarbinski said, only Auburn and Alabama fans would erupt into a Twitter war late Saturday night over who had the better run in the Final Four. But that tells you where college basketball is in Alabama, and football is already something special, and it is across the SEC. Rodney, well, hopefully he'll come back here, but it says a lot, Rodney. But let's talk about spring practice right now with Kalen DeBoer in his first year and the quarterback situation. Jalen Milroe, I doubt anybody puts a depth chart together, but what's happening?
Well, I think the quarterback room overall has been really good this spring in terms of making the adjustments to, Kalen DeBoer's offense. I think Milroe's obviously, the returning starter. He had a really good year last year. All indications are that he's had a good spring. I think that Ty Simpson is extremely talented young guy, just a redshirt sophomore who they kind of battled for this position last year before the season. I think Ty's had a tremendous spring based on everything we hear. Again, we're limited in terms of the media viewing opportunities that we get, but no, he's had a great spring. Ty has had a big scrimmage the other day on Saturday. Had a really good week last week. Can he challenge for the job? I mean, I really don't know. I don't know, what that looks like right now. But the other guys, Dylan Lonergan's had a good spring. I think Austin Mack, the transfer from Washington, has also had a very good spring. So, just speaking specifically about the quarterback room, as you asked, it's been a really good spring for those guys.
Rodney, you think about Kalen DeBoer, 104-12 record as a coach. He's coming to Alabama. He's got a lot more talent, a lot more tools in the toolbox than he's ever had. Let's talk about the offensive line. That Jaden Robertson, you brought this up last year, the big kid, 6'8", 340 or whatever, out of Houston, North Shore High School, came in last year. When he did, that ignited the Alabama offensive line to play their butts off the rest of the year. He's back. Let's talk about him as a catalyst.
Yeah, no, I think last year, obviously, he was running third team at one point, at that right guard spot behind Darian Dalcourt and TJ Ferguson. And, all of a sudden in the Texas A&M game, he starts and he has a great game. Finishes out the season, has a great year. Got injured Saturday in this scrimmage that they had, but I think he's okay. He left on some crutches and a boot, but I think that was almost more precautionary. I don't think he'll be out long. So, I think, he's had a great spring. I think at the other guard spot, obviously, Tyler Booker is a tremendous player, and again, after that, we're waiting for Caden Proctor because I think what's going to happen there is he's going to hit the portal right after it opens. And I think he'll be in Tuscaloosa very quickly after that. So he'll be back, from Iowa. So I think, those are three really big pieces for their offensive line. Now, where it finishes out, how it kind of molds together at the center spot, Parker Brailsford, the transfer from Washington, who everybody kind of penciled in as that starter. He was a second-team All-Pac-12 player, as a redshirt freshman last year at Washington. He's missed several practices for personal related issues. It's nothing that he's done wrong or anything like that. No discipline, anything like that. But he's expected back soon. And then James Brockermeyer's had a good spring there at the center spot. And then at right tackle, I think that's really the place they have to figure that out. Wilkin Formby, the local kid, has done a tremendous job, at the right tackle spot. So Miles McVay's in there as well. And you know what? Don't be surprised when that portal opens if they look for a few offensive linemen, because right now they only have 12 offensive linemen with Brailsford out. They only have 12 offensive linemen on scholarship going through spring practice.
What's normal? Close to 20?
I think, Rob, ideally, if you want to have at least over 3 full offensive lines, would be great. I mean, I think that's kind of what you look for. So I couldn't imagine anything less than 16, 17. But with Brailsford expected back, that obviously give him 13. With Proctor coming in, that's 14. So I could see him going for 2 or 3 in the portal. I really could. So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of unfolds. And, I know that's something that's a goal of theirs, is to get some guys out of the portal.
Yeah. Yancey, whoever, Franz, Chris, y'all jump in here. We got Rodney Ore, Tighter Insider, on with us right now. May Veterinary Clinic, Tuscaloosa and Northport report. So this is really cool because you get all these smart people together. You get a hell of a fire going. Jump in here, Yancey, if you want.
Yeah, usually when you're carrying offensive line for a team, you're looking at 16. Some will carry 18, but 16 is usually the number that you kind of shoot for an offensive lineman. So, like Rodney said, they'll pick up 2 to 3, I'm sure, in the portal. And you look at Alabama, and as he said, I think the quarterback there is a big storyline with Jalen. And but as Rodney said, in the last show that we were all together, the head coach there has been able to kind of mold his offense around the talents of the QB and the personnel. So it'll be interesting to see which way he goes. Does he go, towards that high flying passing offense like he had at Washington there last year, or does he, go in a little bit more of a running quarterback like a Jalen Milroe? The defensive backfield there at Alabama was definitely a question mark with the guys that they lost. So that's another thing, another area that I would look at there at Alabama. But what is anybody really going to learn at any of these spring games? That's really the storyline, because the coaches now, like at Ole Miss, that we're not even aware that Ole Miss has even had pads on this spring. Their spring game is going to be a 7-on-7, a skills competition like you see in the NFL now for their All-Star games. So that's really kind of the storyline is how much can you really find out this spring?
Yeah.
I've got a question for Yancey, Rob. There's
Good
a
one.
transfer there that was really expected to make a major contribution here at Alabama this year. Had a great ending to the season. If you watch the SEC championship game, Trey Amos came up really, really big when Kool-Aid McKinstry went down at corner. Trey's a very, very gifted cornerback. Kind of what has his progress been, this spring?
Well, from all reports, again, there is no depth chart at Ole Miss, and that's again due to what we have with the portal window coming back
Right, right.
open on the 16th of April. So they don't want anybody to know where they fall on the depth chart to protect
Yeah.
the team from transferring. But from all indications that I'm hearing, Trey Amos is definitely locked down one of those slots, and he's been everything that they had hoped for.
Yeah, really talented.
You know what, guys, what we have got to have, and I think it's a matter of when, not if. Is I think first and foremost we're going to have a new organization, and going back to something Chris said a little bit ago, I think the NCAA is died, and we're just waiting for the priest to come in and preach and give last rites for it. At the new organization, and I think one of the things they're going to have to do, because it's going to be a money maker when they do it, is we're going to start playing the D1AA games instead of playing them in the fall. Those are going to be your spring games, and it will be a win-win for both the Division I teams and the D1AA teams, because the D1AA teams don't suffer 20 injuries in the middle of their run to a conference championship and maybe a playoff berth. And we've just got to go to that. I mean, what sense does it make, for example, Yancey, you got Jackson State there. Don't you know that Jackson State and Ole Miss for a spring game you play it maybe in Jackson at the Mississippi Coliseum, or Mississippi State and Alcorn State? Play these games in the spring and bring the bands and shoot, have a fun time out of it. But we've got it will be, when they do this, it'll be a tremendous money maker. I mean, how many D1AA schools do you have right there in Alabama, Rodney? I think y'all have got about 6 or 7 of them, don't you?
Yeah. And Alabama's been reluctant to play any of them.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of interest, and I don't know, we've even heard about spring games where you would have teams in the SEC playing Southern Cal or Washington or Penn State, kind of interest for that. I don't know if that would work, but I do think Franz is right. And Chris, I think you would agree. You got to find something to make money, because the NCAA right now, the respirator's on, the priest is in the room, and they're calling the kinfolk to the bedside. They have done this to themselves because they have played kick the can for too long, and now we got a 5-alarm fire that they don't know how to put out.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've tried to make everybody play by one set of rules for a long time. They've equated the lacrosse player at Brown with the starting quarterback at Alabama, and it was never going to work like that, because the economics are just at odds with it. So, I mean, I've always said this for a long time. I think you need to have governing bodies. You need to have a commissioner of college football, maybe multiple commissioners for every level, and let them. I've said it before. I think Nick Saban would be great to do it. Let Jay Wright or somebody like that got out of basketball for all the issues. Give those people say over things. Let them come up with their own rules that they can live by. And my goodness, once they agree to those rules and they're based in common sense and not this one-size-fits-all model that the NCAA has created for decades and forced everybody to live by, once you start violating the rules and tampering and things in the NBA, where there are real penalties and draft picks lost and that kind of stuff, impose those kind of penalties. I think that's the general direction that we've got to head.
Yeah. And the lack of leadership, now you got Charlie Baker as the head of the NCAA. It just doesn't help. I mean, the commission, Rick Neuheisel, Nick Saban, like you say, Jay Wright, question him. He may be, I'm sure Kentucky's going to make an overture or two to him to be their next coach. But Rodney, looking at Nick Saban now, I know he's got an office there. I think it's at Bryant-Denny Stadium. He's been really quiet, but I know he's got a lot of things he'd like to be saying right now for him looking at college football, where we are with the portal and all. How much will he use his and leverage his influence to try to fix the game and restore some sanity to roster management and all that goes with it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he was in Washington, a few weeks ago, right? I mean, I think that's his goal. I really do. I mean, I think that's part of what he's, really focused on is he said it publicly that he wants to do what he can to kind of get this thing, save college football, however you want to phrase it. And I think that was a great idea, by the way, about the spring games. I think it would, I mean, because there's a downtime here that, people are kind of wanting something, so it'd be a great time. Dabo Swinney's been saying it for years, that they needed to do something in the spring, play a spring game of some sort. So hopefully that is something that is on the horizon, hopefully.
Yeah. Yancey, you mentioned a 7-on-7 competition with Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's a unique case, but he's so big that he now can do whatever he wants in terms of wherever he is, he's successful. So people are going to believe him if he says something. I think he's earned that right. Yancey.
Yeah, I think when you look at what Lane's doing here is that he's just really kind of adapting to the cards that have been dealt to him. I mean, or not to him, but to everybody in college football. Why would you have a spring game where you could actually have a depth chart for players to feel like that they're not in the position in the depth chart that they want to be? To go in the portal on April the 16th is kind of like with the the NIT, and then you have the portal that starts the next day. They kind of run the NIT with the window that the portal started, and it's going to be just like that for the spring game. I think things were headed in that direction at one time of playing the AA teams or giving smaller schools an opportunity to play against the Power 5 programs in the spring game to bring revenue for those schools. But you just can't do that now. And we saw that the NCAA last night, they passed legislation that still has to be passed another place somewhere within the legislation. But they're going to be proactive and get ahead of the judge there in West Virginia, where they said you can have multiple transfers now, not only a one-time transfer. So, it's until I think the players become employees of the NCAA, of the universities where they share revenue, you're going to have a lot of ambiguous rulings that are going to leave everything up in the air, and it's going to be words of caution from all these coaches around the country right now.
Yeah.
Guys, I got to tell you something. The only way this is going to happen is to kill the NCAA completely, and it has to be. You cannot the NCAA, because of its own ineptitude, you can't. I hate to use this term, but I'm going to use it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I
haven't heard that before.
It's so stupid. No, none of us have. I'm sure. Especially you educated guys here. I mean, Chris went to school at real schools like the rest of us.
Yeah, Vanderbilt magna cum laude, I believe.
Actually, I did not go to Vandy, but anyway, carry on. But thank you.
Yeah, carry on.
but we've got the only way it's going to happen is you got to start with a brand new model.
Yeah.
And when you start with a brand new model, you can make your new rules, and then everybody comes in and complies with the new rules, or else you don't get to join the organization. And that's the only way you're going to be able to get a handle on this. You're right, Yancey. They're going to have to become employees. That's a done deal, because you can't have a salary cap without them being employees, and it's going to take that. I know a lot of people hate that idea, but there comes a time when you got to buckle down and say, okay, we have run this other thing until it dies. Now we got to try something new. I don't know that employees are the answer, but I think they are in the short term, at least. Yeah. Long term, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure players are going to like it. I guarantee you coaches aren't going to like it, although I will say this. What happens now if, let's say, I got this right tackle here named Billy Bob.
Yeah.
And Rodney has a left guard named Jimmy Jack, and Yancey has a center that we all three covet, and we start arranging trades, because once they're employees, I mean, hey, we can do this like the major leagues and do a 3-way trade, and Chris can have a player to be named later for us.
Yeah, that's what we better watch out. That something's got to change, because just sticking your head in the sand and hoping it changes never works.
There's one other complication. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Yancey.
No. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Well, just too quick. There's two other things that we've not even touched on, and we're kind of talking about this as if it's a second professional system. Allegedly, these guys are student athletes, and so you've got the degree requirements in the class and all the stuff that gets tied to that. That's one of the two big things out there that makes this, not a little more complicated, a lot more complicated. And then you got the Title IX stuff. Those are always the two entanglements that I'm not quite sure how you put those in the mix with all these other things too, and where it settles in an even place.
Yeah. And it's going to be, Yancey, I know you wanted to say something. We're about to wrap up, but we're at a point now to where we're going to wait for there to be a 5-alarm fire to try to buy fire insurance, or we fix this problem this spring or this summer. Media days are likely places to launch a new battle plan, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of this in the NCAA defense, which is really hard to do. I can't believe I say that, but it comes from the court system. Their hands are tied, and I think the NCAA kind of relishes the chaos, because they want order, and they want the public, they want the players, they want the coaches to be able to come back to them and say, give us order again, where their rulings will be respected instead of mocked. And so there's a lot of different variables that are going on right now.
Yeah, and one last thing before we go to Yancey, that antitrust laws are what the NCAA and the colleges have to be most concerned about. And our barrister in residence, Jack Turner, we're going to get him back on the show again here in the next week or so to talk about where we are. But hey, thanks everybody. And Rodney Ore, Tighter Insider, let you close us out. But most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Every day Go out and do great things for other people and be thankful for all the blessings that come our way. We are blessed to have unbelievable guests, an awesome executive producer, Brendan Martin, the son of Wilton Francis, Buddy Martin, Wilton. I love that name. Fransbeard, GatorBaitMedia.com. We'll be on tonight on the Buddy Martin Show. You can check that out every Monday through Thursday, sometimes Fridays at 9 p.m. live on YouTube and a number of other channels. But and check out all of our sponsors, like the Vitamin Shop in Oxford and Olive Branch, Mississippi. Unbelievable round table. And Rodney, close us out, and we'll be doing this again tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for Alabama fans out there, it's titerinsider.com. It's only $48 a year, and you can get access with your credit card. If you prefer, there is an address there to send a check. Gives y'all our premium information, but also our community of Alabama fans there. I mean, they're right now, Rob, it's really hot and heavy. They're so excited about the Nate Oates statement last night. But titerinsider.com.
Yeah, and, Rebel Yell Hotline Monday night, 6 p.m., Sports 56, WHBQ, and Super Talk Mississippi, Yancey Porter, and FransGatorBaitMedia.com. Chris Lee, you're doing some great stuff up there. I love watching your shows. Got some great panels. I just want to know when we're going to see the Southeastern 16. Have you got the pennants on order of Oklahoma and Texas?
I don't have them on order, but I'm glad you reminded me. I need to. I have an idea for what this is going to look like behind me now. Yeah. There's a little structure in place. It just needs to be executed.
Well, look, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing their time with us. And again, smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. You'll get alerts live every time we go have a show. We're going to be dropping a podcast here pretty soon on Texas that Buddy Martin, Ken Capps, and I did. It's evergreen content, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.